My name is Roman. I'm 30 years old and I've worked hard as a software engineer to build my independence. Growing up with controlling parents was suffocating, which is why I treasure my small apartment that I pay for myself. Nothing prepared me for coming home from work to find my sister had moved in without my permission. The violation of my space and boundaries led me to make one call that changed everything. If you're watching this video, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Also, hit that like and subscribe button if you believe family should respect your boundaries no matter what. Now let me tell you how it all went down. I need to give you some context about my family situation to help you understand why what happened was so devastating. Growing up, my parents were the definition of helicopter parents. Every decision, every friendship, every hobby was scrutinized and often controlled. Privacy wasn't something they believed children deserved. My bedroom door was removed when I was 14 because I asked for some space. My journals were read regularly. My phone calls were monitored. It was suffocating. My younger sister Madison, who's 26 now, had a completely different experience. 4 years younger than me, she was the golden child who could do no wrong. When I got a B on a test, it was a disappointment. When Madison got a C, it was celebrated because at least she tried her best. The double standard was obvious to everyone except my parents. Despite the challenging home environment, I managed to excel in school. I secured a partial scholarship to study computer science at a state university about 200 miles from home. Those college years were transformative. For the first time, I experienced what freedom felt like. I could make my own schedule, choose my own friends, and live without constant monitoring. The distance from my family was exactly what I needed. After graduation, I landed a job at a mid-sized tech company. The starting salary wasn't impressive, but it was enough for me to rent a small studio apartment. I lived frugally, brought lunch from home, and avoided unnecessary expenses. Every dollar saved was a dollar toward my independence. 3 years later, I was promoted to senior software engineer. The salary bump allowed me to upgrade to a one-bedroom apartment in a nicer neighborhood. It's not luxurious by any means, but it's mine. 900 square feet of space that I earned through hard work and determination. The living room gets excellent morning light. The kitchen is small but functional. There's even a little balcony where I keep a few plants. I've lived there for almost 2 years now, and it's the first place that's truly felt like home. My relationship with my family remained strained even after I moved out. My parents constantly questioned my life choices. Why wasn't I dating seriously? Shouldn't I be looking to buy a house instead of wasting money on rent? When was I planning to visit more often? Every conversation felt like an interrogation. To protect my mental health, I established clear boundaries. Visits needed to be planned in advance. Dropping by unannounced was not acceptable. Phone calls were scheduled for Sunday evenings, which helped contain the anxiety they often triggered to just one day of the week. It wasn't perfect, but it was manageable. Madison's life took a different path. She attended a local community college while living at home, then moved into our parents' rental property nearby. They charged her minimal rent and were constantly involved in her life. She worked as a marketing assistant for a small local business, but never seemed to take her career seriously. When she was fired 6 months ago for consistently showing up late, our parents made excuses for her. When her boyfriend of 3 years broke up with her 2 months ago because she expected him to financially support her lifestyle, they took her side completely. I heard about these situations during our Sunday calls, but I kept my opinions to myself. I'd learned long ago that offering a perspective different from my parents' worldview only led to arguments. So I listened, made non-committal responses, and changed the subject when possible. Last month, my parents visited my apartment for the first time in almost a year. The visit was tense but civil. My mother criticized my furniture choices and suggested I needed a woman's touch to make the place homier. My father questioned why I was throwing away money on rent instead of buying a house. Standard fare for them. They stayed for lunch, which I prepared, then left after about 3 hours. I remember feeling relieved when they drove away. What I didn't know was that this visit wasn't as innocent as it seemed. Throughout those 3 hours, they were assessing my apartment not as proud parents, but as people looking to solve their other child's problems at my expense. They were calculating how Madison could fit into my space. And at some point during that visit, they did something that would shatter the fragile peace I had established with them. During the following weeks, nothing seemed amiss. Our Sunday calls continued as usual. Madison's situation was mentioned occasionally. She was struggling to find a new job. She was having trouble making rent payments. She was still heartbroken over her breakup. I sympathized but kept my distance. Their problems were not my responsibility, a mantra I had to constantly remind myself of after years of being made to feel responsible for everyone else's happiness. Little did I know that my family was planning something that would violate my boundaries in a way I never could have anticipated. The sense of security I had built in my own home was about to be shattered completely. The day everything changed started like any other Tuesday. I woke up at 6:30, went for a quick run, showered, and had breakfast while checking emails. I was at my desk by 8:45, deep in code by 9, and fully immersed in work until my team's lunch meeting at noon. The afternoon was packed with debugging sessions and a planning meeting for our next sprint. By 5:15 I was wrapping up and looking forward to going home. The commute was typical. 30 minutes of bumper-to-bumper traffic while I listened to a software development podcast. I parked in my usual spot, grabbed my laptop bag, and headed up to my third-floor apartment. The first sign that something was wrong came when I put my key in the lock. It turned more easily than usual, as if the door wasn't fully locked. When I pushed the door open, I immediately noticed unfamiliar shoes in the entryway. Women's sneakers and boots that definitely weren't mine. A coat I'd never seen before was hanging on my coat rack. My heart started racing. Had someone broken in? But burglars don't typically hang up their coats and arrange their shoes neatly. I cautiously moved further into my apartment and heard the sound of my TV playing. Walking into the living room, I froze in shock. There was Madison lounging on my couch, feet up on my coffee table, watching some reality show as if she owned the place. "Hey bro," she said casually, barely looking away from the screen. "There's leftover pizza in the fridge if you're hungry." For several seconds I couldn't speak. My brain was struggling to process what I was seeing. "Madison, what are you doing here? How did you get in?" I finally managed to ask. She glanced at me with mild annoyance at being questioned. "Mom and Dad gave me your spare key. Didn't they tell you I'd be staying here for a while?" "No," I said, my voice rising with each word. "They absolutely did not tell me that. I don't have a spare key. The only people with keys to my apartment are me and the building manager." Madison shrugged. "Well, they had a copy made from their key when they visited last month. They thought it would be easier this way." The implications of what she was saying hit me like a physical blow. My parents had secretly copied my apartment key without my knowledge or consent. They had given that unauthorized copy to my sister. And they had apparently told her she could move into my apartment without even asking me. "This isn't happening," I said, more to myself than to Madison. "You can't just move in here without my permission. This is my apartment. I pay the rent. You need to pack up whatever you brought and leave. Now." Madison rolled her eyes. "Don't be so dramatic. It's not like you don't have the space. Besides, Mom and Dad already moved all your bedroom stuff out here. I set up the pull-out couch for you. It's really comfortable. I tested it earlier." Her words sent me rushing to my bedroom. What I found made me feel physically ill. My bedroom had been completely transformed. My bed was still there, but with different bedding. Madison's clothes filled my closet. Her makeup and personal items covered the dresser. The framed photographs of my friends and my graduation had been moved to a box on the floor. The space that had been mine no longer felt like it belonged to me. I stormed back to the living room, where Madison was still calmly watching TV as if nothing was wrong. "This is completely unacceptable," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "You had no right to move in here. My parents had no right to copy my key or tell you that you could stay here. This is illegal. You are trespassing in my home." Madison finally seemed to realize I was seriously upset. She sat up straighter and turned down the volume on the TV. "Look, I needed a place to stay, okay? I couldn't make rent after losing my job, and Kyle broke up with me, so I couldn't move in with him like we planned. Mom and Dad suggested I stay with you until I get back on my feet. They said you wouldn't mind helping family." "They were wrong," I said firmly. "I do mind. Very much. You should have asked me directly. This isn't about helping family. This is about respect and boundaries, neither of which any of you seem to understand." Madison's expression changed from defensive to wounded. The familiar guilt trip was starting, and I recognized it from years of family dynamics. "So you're saying you won't help your own sister when she's down on her luck? What kind of brother does that family is supposed to be there for each other?" Family is supposed to respect each other, I countered. Family doesn't break into someone's home and rearrange their belongings without permission. Family doesn't make copies of keys without asking. Family doesn't assume they can just take over someone else's space without even a conversation. Madison's eyes welled with tears. Another familiar tactic. Where am I supposed to go? I have nowhere else. Mom and Dad's house is being renovated and their rental is occupied. You're literally my only option right now. That's not my problem, I said, though the words were difficult to say. Years of conditioning made me feel like I was committing some cardinal sin by not sacrificing my own well-being for my family. You need to call Mom and Dad and figure something out. But you cannot stay here. I want you out tonight. The tears stopped, almost immediately replaced by anger. I'm not going anywhere. Mom and Dad said I could stay here, and they're the ones who raised you and paid for your college. You owe them, which means you owe me too. In that moment I realized this wasn't going to be resolved easily. The entitlement ran too deep. The disregard for my feelings and my space was too ingrained. This was going to get much worse before it got better. With Madison refusing to leave, I stepped onto my balcony and called my parents. My hands were shaking with anger as I dialed the number. My father answered on the third ring. "Roman, we were wondering when you'd call. Did you see the surprise we arranged for you?" He sounded pleased with himself, as if he'd done me some great favor. "A surprise?" I repeated, my voice tight. "Is that what you call breaking into my apartment and moving someone in without my permission?" There was a brief pause before my father's tone changed to defensive. "Now hold on. No one broke in. We used a key." "A key you copied without asking me," I said. "That's illegal, Dad. It violates my lease agreement. It violates basic privacy and boundaries. What were you thinking?" "We were thinking about family," my mother's voice came through, indicating she was listening on another extension. "Your sister needed help, and you have the space. We didn't think you'd be so selfish about it." The accusation of selfishness was a familiar weapon in my parents' arsenal. Any time I did something for myself or established a boundary, I was labeled selfish. "This isn't about selfishness," I said. "This is about respect. You should have asked me before making any decisions about my home. You should have asked before copying my key. You should have asked before moving my things and taking over my bedroom." "We knew you'd say no," my father said bluntly. "You've been distant from the family ever since you moved out. Always too busy for visits, always making excuses. We knew you wouldn't help your sister if we asked directly." His admission stunned me. They knew I would refuse, so they simply bypassed my consent altogether. The realization of how little they respected me as an adult was painful. "So you decided to force the situation," I said. "That's not okay. Madison needs to leave. Tonight, and I want that key returned to me immediately." "Don't be ridiculous," my mother snapped. "Where is she supposed to go? You know she's been struggling since losing her job and her relationship. Are you really going to put your own sister out on the street?" "She won't be on the street," I countered. "She has you too. The same parents who apparently thought it was acceptable to invade my privacy and violate my home. After everything we've done for you," my father said, his voice rising, "we raised you, we supported you through college, we helped you get on your feet. And this is how you repay us, by refusing to help your sister when she needs it." "I'm grateful for what you've done for me," I said, though part of me wanted to point out that supporting your children is what parents are supposed to do, not something children need to repay. "But that doesn't give you the right to make decisions about my home without my consent." "Family helps family," my mother insisted. "That's how it works. Your sister would do the same for you if the situations were reversed." I doubted that very much, but I kept that thought to myself. "This isn't negotiable. I want Madison out of my apartment tonight." "That's not happening," my father said firmly. "She's staying. And if you have a problem with that, maybe you need to reconsider what it means to be part of this family." The implied threat wasn't subtle. Fall in line, or risk being cut off from the family entirely. It was a control tactic they had used throughout my childhood and young adulthood. "Are you really threatening to disown me because I won't let you commandeer my apartment?" I asked. "No one's threatening anything," my mother said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "We're simply pointing out that family obligations go both ways. We've always been there for you. Now it's your turn to be there for your sister." By giving up my bedroom and sleeping on my couch for the foreseeable future in my own apartment that I pay for. It's temporary, my father insisted, though he carefully avoided specifying what temporary meant. Just until Madison gets back on her feet. Given Madison's history and my parents' enabling temporary could mean months or even years, I wasn't willing to sacrifice my privacy, my comfort, and my independence for that long. This is my final word on the subject, I said. Madison needs to be out of my apartment by 9 o'clock tonight. If she's not, I'll have to take more drastic measures. What's that supposed to mean? My mother demanded. It means I'm not accepting this invasion of my home. I have rights. I'm an adult. This is my space, and I decide who lives in it. You ungrateful little, my father began, but I ended the call before he could finish the insult. I stood on the balcony for several minutes, trying to calm my racing heart. The conversation had gone exactly as I expected, but that didn't make it any less painful. The realization that my parents saw nothing wrong with what they had done, that they felt entitled to make decisions about my life without my input, was heartbreaking. But I was determined not to give in. This was a line that couldn't be uncrossed. With a deep breath, I went back inside to confront Madison directly. Maybe she would be more reasonable without our parents fueling her entitlement. When I re-entered my living room, Madison was on her phone, undoubtedly getting a real-time update from our parents. She looked up at me with a mixture of defiance and faux victimhood. I just got off the phone with Mom and Dad, I told her, keeping my voice as calm and steady as possible. I've made it clear that this arrangement isn't acceptable to me. You need to find somewhere else to stay. Madison put her phone down and crossed her arms. They said, I don't have to leave. This is a family matter, and you're being unreasonable. I took a deep breath. Madison, I'm trying to approach this rationally. I understand you're going through a difficult time, but that doesn't give you the right to take over my home without permission. If you had called and asked if you could stay for a few days while you figured things out, we could have had a conversation about it. But this, moving in, completely taking over my bedroom, rearranging my things, that's not okay. It wasn't my idea, she said defensively. Mom and Dad arranged everything. They thought it would be better this way because they knew you'd make a big deal out of it if they asked first. And don't you see how problematic that is? I asked. They knew I wouldn't agree, so they decided to do it anyway and force me to accept it. That's not how healthy relationships work. Madison shrugged, looking uncomfortable. For a moment, I thought I might be getting through to her. Look, I said, softening my tone. I'm not saying I won't help you, but we need to establish some boundaries. If you really need a place to stay, I could let you crash on the couch for 2 weeks while you find a new apartment. But I need my bedroom back, and I need you to understand that this is my space. 2 weeks isn't enough time, she protested. I don't have a job yet. I can't afford an apartment without income. Then you need to stay with Mom and Dad until you find work. Their house renovation isn't an emergency. They can delay it or make space for you. Madison's face hardened. They said you'd try to kick me out. They told me not to let you. She picked up her phone again. I'm calling them right now. They're on their way over. My stomach dropped. You've got to be kidding me. You called our parents to come over here. They said, to call. If you gave me trouble, she said, as if this was a perfectly reasonable response. I ran my hand through my hair in frustration. Madison, this is exactly the problem. You're 36 years old. I'm 30. We shouldn't need our parents to mediate our conflicts. We should be able to talk about this as adults. Well, you're not being reasonable, she said petulantly, so I need backup. The childishness of her response would have been comical if it wasn't so frustrating. I realized that decades of being the favorite child, of having our parents solve all her problems, had stunted Madison's ability to handle conflict or take responsibility for her actions. Fine, I said. Let them come. But nothing is going to change. This is my apartment, and I decide who lives here. While waiting for our parents to arrive, Madison and I sat in uncomfortable silence. She returned to watching TV deliberately, turning the volume up louder than necessary. I retreated to the kitchen, trying to process what was happening and consider my options. 30 minutes later, there was a sharp knock at the door. When I opened it, my parents barged in without greeting me. My father's face was flushed with anger. My mother had her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. They looked ready for battle. This needs to stop right now, my father said, pointing a finger at my chest. Your sister is staying here, and that's final. You don't get to make that decision. I replied, standing my ground. This is my apartment. My name is on the lease. I pay the rent. I decide who lives here. After everything we've done for you, my mother began, her voice trembling with either genuine or manufactured emotion. This is how you treat us. This is how you treat your sister. This isn't about what you've done for me, I said. It's about respect. You violated my privacy by copying my key without permission. You moved someone into my apartment without asking. You rearranged my personal belongings. These are not the actions of people who respect me as an adult. We wouldn't have had to do any of that if you weren't so selfish, my father countered. You have all this space, and your sister needs help. What kind of person refuses to help family? I'm not refusing to help, I clarified. I'm refusing to have help forced upon me in a way that violates my boundaries. There's a difference. Madison had joined us by this point, standing slightly behind our parents with tears streaming down her face. The performance was well-rehearsed and effective. I'd seen it countless times throughout our childhood whenever she wanted to get her way. I don't know why you hate me so much, she said between sobs. I've always looked up to you, and now you want to throw me out on the street. That's not what this is about, and you know it, I said, though my resolve was wavering in the face of their united front. The programming ran deep. Making my sister cry made me the bad guy regardless of the circumstances. Roman, my mother, said her voice softening into the manipulative tone. I knew well we're just asking you to be generous for a little while. Madison will find a job soon and then she'll get her own place. But right now she needs her family. She needs you. And what about what I need? I asked. What about my need for privacy, for respect, for autonomy in my own home? Don't be so dramatic, my father scoffed. It's not like we're asking you to give up a kidney. It's just sharing your apartment for a while. Sharing would have involved asking first, I pointed out. What you did wasn't sharing. It was taking. My mother looked around the apartment with a critical eye. Honestly, I don't see why you're making such a fuss. This place is too big for just one person anyway. It's wasteful. It's mine, I said simply. I work hard to afford it. I like having the space to myself. That's not wasteful. That's my choice. Well, you're making the wrong choice now, my father said, his voice rising again. If you force your sister to leave, you can forget about being part of this family. No more holiday gatherings. No more birthday celebrations. No more Sunday calls. You'll be cut off completely. The threat hung in the air, heavy and ominous. For a moment I considered giving in. The programming was that strong. The fear of being completely alone, of losing the only family I had, was powerful. But then I looked around my apartment. At the shoes that weren't mine in the entryway. At the unfamiliar coat on my rack. At my sister's tear-stained face still performing for our parents' benefit. At my father's angry stance and my mother's manipulative expression. And I realized that if this was what family meant to them, violation, control, disrespect, maybe being cut off wouldn't be the worst thing. I think you all need to leave, I said quietly but firmly. Now, all of you. We're not going anywhere, my father declared. And neither is Madison. This is my apartment, I repeated. I'm asking you to leave. Or what my father challenged, taking a step toward me. In that moment I knew that reasonable approaches had failed. Logic hadn't worked. Appeals to respect and boundaries had fallen on deaf ears. My family was not going to leave willingly. They were going to continue to steamroll over my objections because that's what they had always done, and they expected me to eventually give in because that's what I had always done. But not this time. This time I was going to stand firm, even if it meant taking drastic action. I looked at my family standing in my living room, united in their belief that they had the right to control my life, to make decisions about my home without consulting me, to override my objections with tears and threats. In that moment I saw with perfect clarity the pattern that had defined our relationship for 30 years. They pushed. I resisted. They pushed harder. I eventually gave in. They won. I lost. Not today. I've asked you 3 times to leave my apartment, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You've refused each time. At this point, you're trespassing. My father laughed dismissively. Trespassing? In your own son's apartment? Don't be ridiculous. It's not ridiculous, I replied. It's the law. I have a legal right to decide who enters and remains in my home. You entered with a key that was illegally duplicated. You've been asked to leave and have refused. That's trespassing. "We're your parents," my mother said, as if that fact negated all laws and social norms. "We can't trespass in your home." "Actually, you can," I said. "And you are." Madison, who had been relatively quiet during this exchange, spoke up. "What are you going to do about it? Call the police on your own family." Her tone suggested the very idea was absurd. I looked her directly in the eyes. "Yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do if you don't leave right now." The three of them exchanged glances, then burst into laughter. They didn't believe me. They thought I was bluffing. Because in their minds I would never take such a drastic step against my family. I would never choose my own well-being over their demands. I would never stand firm when pushed to my breaking point. They were wrong. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Their laughter died abruptly as they realized I was serious. "What are you doing?" my father demanded, his face reddening. "Put that phone down right now." I ignored him, waiting for the operator to answer. 911. "What's your emergency?" a calm voice answered. "Hello, I need assistance with removing trespassers from my apartment," I said, maintaining eye contact with my father. "Don't you dare," my mother hissed, stepping toward me with her hand outstretched as if to grab the phone. I stepped back, continuing my conversation with the operator. "3 people are in my apartment and refusing to leave when asked. One of them gained entry using an illegally duplicated key." "Are you in immediate danger?" the operator asked. I glanced at my father's clenched fists and flushed face. "I don't believe so, but the situation is escalating and I'm concerned it might." "You're destroying this family," my mother said, her voice breaking. "Over what an apartment is your precious privacy worth more than your relationship with us?" "It's not about the apartment," I said, covering the phone briefly. "It's about respect. It's about boundaries. It's about 30 years of having neither from any of you." "We're sending officers to your location," the operator informed me. "Can you provide your address?" As I gave my address, Madison finally seemed to grasp the seriousness of the situation. Her tears, which had seemed calculated before now, appeared genuine. "Roman, please," she begged. "Don't do this. We can work something out. I'll find somewhere else to stay. Just hang up the phone." But it was too late. The call had been made. Officers were on their way. And truthfully, even if Madison was willing to leave now, my parents showed no signs of backing down. My father looked ready to physically prevent me from making them leave. My mother was cycling rapidly between tearful pleas and angry accusations. The situation had already escalated beyond my ability to defuse it. "Officers should arrive within 10 minutes, the operator said. "Please try to remain calm and avoid confrontation until they arrive. Would you like me to stay on the line with you?" I considered the question, looking at my family's angry and betrayed expressions. "No, I think I'll be okay. Thank you." After ending the call, the apartment filled with a tense silence. My father was the first to break it. "I can't believe you just did that," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Calling the police on your own family. You've crossed a line that can't be uncrossed." "You crossed the line first," I replied. "When you copied my key without permission. When you moved Madison in without asking. When you refused to leave when asked. Every step of this, you've been the ones crossing lines." "We're your parents," my mother said, as if that explained and excused everything. "We've always known what's best for you, even when you couldn't see it yourself." "I'm 30 years old," I said. "I decide what's best for me. I have for years. You just haven't been able to accept that." Madison had sunk onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. "The police are coming to arrest us," she moaned. "This is going to ruin my life." "No one's getting arrested if you leave now," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true given the illegal key duplication. "We're not going anywhere," my father declared, crossing his arms stubbornly. "Let the police come. We'll explain that this is a family matter, and they'll leave us to sort it out ourselves." His confidence that the authorities would side with them was revealing. My parents truly believed that their status as parents gave them special rights over me and my property. Even though I was an adult, they genuinely didn't think they had done anything wrong. The next several minutes passed in uncomfortable silence. My parents stood their ground, occasionally exchanging whispers. Madison remained on the couch, alternating between crying and shooting me accusatory glances. I stood by the door, waiting for the police to arrive, trying to ignore the mixture of guilt and resolve churning in my stomach. When the knock finally came, I opened the door to find 2 uniformed officers, a man and a woman, standing in the hallway. "We received a call about trespassers," the female officer said. "Yes, that was me," I confirmed. "Please come in." As the officers entered my apartment, my parents immediately approached them, speaking over each other in their haste to present their version of events. "This is all a misunderstanding," my father began. "We're his parents," my mother added, as if that fact alone would resolve everything. The male officer held up a hand to silence them. "Let's take this one person at a time. Sir, since you made the call, can you explain what's happening here?" I took a deep breath and gave them a concise summary. "This is my apartment. I live alone. I pay the rent. My name is the only one on the lease. While I was at work today, my sister moved in without my permission using a key my parents had secretly copied during a previous visit. When I asked them all to leave, they refused. That's why I called you." "That's not the whole story," my mother protested. "His sister needs a place to stay. We were just trying to help her." "By breaking into my apartment and taking over my bedroom without asking," I added. The female officer turned to my parents. "Did you make a copy of his key without permission?" My father hesitated, then grudgingly admitted, "Yes, but we're his parents. We thought we might need access in an emergency." "And did you move your daughter into his apartment without his knowledge or consent?" she continued. "He has the space," my mother said defensively. "She needed help. Family helps family." "That's not answering the question," the officer pointed out. "Did you move your daughter in without his permission?" "Yes," my father admitted, "but only because we knew he'd say no if we asked first." The officers exchanged glances. The male officer turned to me. "Do you have your lease agreement handy? We'd like to verify that you're the only person authorized to live here." I retrieved the document from a file folder in my kitchen drawer and handed it to him. He reviewed it carefully, noting that my name was indeed the only one listed as a tenant. "According to this, you're the only person with the legal right to reside in this apartment," he confirmed, returning the lease to me. "Anyone else living here without your consent and the landlord's approval would be in violation of the terms." The female officer addressed my parents and sister. "Based on what we've heard, you three are indeed trespassing. The unauthorized duplication of a key is also a criminal offense. I'm going to have to ask you to leave immediately." "This is ridiculous," my father exploded. "We're his family. Parents can't trespass in their children's homes." "Actually, sir, they can," the male officer corrected him. "Once a person reaches adulthood, parents have no special legal rights to enter their property without permission." My mother turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "Roman, please, don't do this. We can talk about this. We can work something out." It was too late for that. If they had been willing to talk and work something out earlier, things wouldn't have escalated to this point. Their willingness to negotiate now was only because they realized they were facing actual consequences for their actions. "I want them to leave," I said firmly to the officers, "and I want the unauthorized key returned." The female officer nodded. "Ma'am, do you have the key with you?" she asked Madison. Madison reluctantly pulled my apartment key from her purse and handed it over. The officer passed it to me. "Now all three of you need to gather your belongings and leave," she instructed my family. "Only take what you brought with you today. Anything else can be arranged for pickup at a later time with the tenant's permission." "I'm not leaving," my father declared, planting his feet firmly. "This is my son's home, and I have a right to be here." The male officer stepped closer to my father. "Sir, you don't have that right if the tenant asks you to leave. If you continue to refuse, we'll have no choice but to place you under arrest for trespassing." My father's face went pale at the mention of arrest. For the first time, the gravity of the situation seemed to truly register with him. This wasn't a family disagreement that could be resolved through his usual tactics of intimidation and emotional manipulation. This was a legal matter with real consequences. "You wouldn't dare arrest me," he said to the officers, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Sir, we're giving you the opportunity to leave voluntarily," the female officer said. "If you refuse, arrest is the next step. Those are your options." My mother grabbed my father's arm, suddenly looking frightened. "Frank, let's just go. We can figure this out later." Madison stood up from the couch, wiping her tears. "This is humiliating," she muttered. "I can't believe you'd do this to us." "I didn't do this," I said quietly. "You all did when you decided my home and my boundaries weren't worthy of respect." My father looked at me with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "If we walk out that door, don't expect to ever hear from us again. You're choosing an apartment over your family." No, I corrected him. I'm choosing self-respect over being controlled. I'm choosing healthy boundaries over toxic relationships. I'm choosing to be treated like an adult rather than a possession. The male officer cleared his throat. I need a decision right now. Are you leaving voluntarily, or do we need to place you under arrest? My father hesitated, clearly torn between his pride and the reality of being handcuffed and taken to a police station. Finally, my mother made the decision for him. We're leaving, she announced. Madison, get your overnight bag. We'll come back for the rest of your things another time when your brother is being more reasonable. Actually, the female officer interjected, you won't be coming back without the tenant's explicit permission. Any attempt to enter this apartment without consent will result in immediate arrest. Madison disappeared into what had been my bedroom and emerged a few minutes later with a duffel bag. Her makeup was smeared from crying, and she deliberately avoided looking at me as she walked toward the door. My mother followed, pausing beside me. I hope you're happy now, she said bitterly. Your sister has nowhere to go. She has you, I reminded her. The same parents who thought it was acceptable to break into my apartment and rearrange my life without asking. My father was the last to move toward the door. His face was flushed with anger, and for a moment I thought he might lash out physically. The presence of the police officers seemed to be the only thing restraining him. You're no son of mine, he spat as he passed me. No real man would treat his family this way. His words stung, but I stood firm. A real family wouldn't treat me the way you have. The officers escorted my family out of the apartment. I stood in the doorway watching as they walked down the hallway toward the elevator. Several of my neighbors had poked their heads out of their apartments, curious about the police presence. The humiliation of being removed by officers seemed to keep my family from making a scene in the hallway, though I knew this wasn't the end of the matter. Once they were in the elevator, the female officer turned to me. Would you like to press charges for the unauthorized key duplication? I hesitated. Despite everything, these were still my parents and sister. The thought of them being arrested and facing criminal charges was difficult to contemplate. But I also knew that without serious consequences, they would likely try something similar in the future. Yes, I decided, I want to press charges. They need to understand that what they did was wrong and illegal. The officer nodded. We'll need you to come down to the station to make a formal statement. Also, I'd recommend changing your locks as soon as possible. Even though we recovered one key, there could be others. After taking my contact information and providing me with case numbers and next steps, the officers left. As the door closed behind them, I was left alone in an apartment that no longer felt entirely like mine. Madison's brief occupation had left traces everywhere. Her scent on the couch cushions, her half-empty soda can on the coffee table, her toiletries in the bathroom. I moved through the rooms, taking stock of what had been moved or changed. My bedroom was the worst. All my clothing had been shoved to one side of the closet to make room for Madison's things. My dresser drawers had been emptied, my items piled haphazardly in a storage bin. My bedding had been changed, my favorite comforter nowhere to be seen. The violation felt profound. It wasn't just about physical space. It was about the disregard for my autonomy, for my right to make decisions about my own life. The message was clear: my feelings, my boundaries, my preferences didn't matter. All that mattered were my parents' desires and Madison's needs. I spent the next hour changing the bedding back to my own sheets and pillowcases, which I found stuffed in the linen closet. I restored my clothing to my dresser drawers. I reclaimed my bedroom space. But the sense of violation lingered. Someone had been in my most private space without permission, touching my things, rearranging my life. That feeling wouldn't disappear quickly. As I was putting the last of my books back on my nightstand, my phone started ringing. It was my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister. I hesitated before answering, knowing exactly why she was calling. "Roman, what on earth is going on?" she demanded without preamble. "Your mother just called me in hysterics saying you had them arrested for trying to help Madison." "That's not what happened," I said, then proceeded to give her the unvarnished truth about the key copying the unauthorized move-in and the refusal to leave when asked. There was a long pause when I finished. I had a feeling I wasn't getting the full story. Aunt Carol finally said, "Your mother has always had a flair for the dramatic and a selective memory when it comes to her own actions." Her response surprised me. I had expected another attack, not understanding. "You really called the police on them?" she asked, though her tone was more curious than judgmental. "I did," I confirmed. They gave me no choice. They refused to leave when asked multiple times. They thought they could just force me to accept their decision about my own home. That sounds like Frank and Diane, she admitted with a sigh. They've never been good at respecting boundaries. I remember when you were little how they would read your journal go through your backpack. I told Diane then it wasn't right that children deserve privacy too, but she never listened. I hadn't known that anyone in my family had recognized or objected to my parents' controlling behavior. It was strangely validating to hear. Madison's staying with me now, Aunt Carol continued. Your mother called asking if she could bring her here. I agreed, but I made it clear it's temporary, 2 weeks max, and she needs to be actively job hunting during that time. Thank you, I said, genuinely grateful. I was worried about where she would go. Don't thank me yet, she warned. Your parents are furious. They're talking about cutting you off completely. No contact, no holidays, nothing. They've already made that threat, I said. And honestly, after what they did, I'm not sure I want contact with them unless something fundamentally changes in how they treat me. I understand, Aunt Carol said softly. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. It was extreme, yes, but sometimes extreme boundaries are necessary with people who consistently violate normal ones. After ending the call with my aunt, I felt marginally better. At least one family member understood and supported my decision. It wasn't much, but it was something. The next morning I called a locksmith and had all the locks changed. I also spoke with my building manager explaining the situation and ensuring that no keys would be given to anyone claiming to be my family. He was sympathetic and updated my tenant file with a note that only I was authorized to receive keys or access my apartment. I also filed for a temporary restraining order against my parents and Madison. It felt like an extreme step, but after consulting with a lawyer, I understood it was necessary to protect myself legally. The unauthorized key duplication and trespassing were serious matters, and the restraining order would provide additional legal protection if they attempted to return to my apartment. The following week was one of the most emotionally draining of my life. I gave my statement at the police station. I attended a hearing for the restraining order. I fielded calls and texts from extended family members who had heard various versions of the story from my parents. Some were supportive once they heard my side. Others condemned me for turning against family. I blocked the most aggressive ones and limited contact with others. Madison sent me a lengthy text message 3 days after the incident, alternating between apologies and accusations. She claimed she hadn't known our parents copied the key without permission, a lie given her earlier admission. She said she was sorry for moving in without asking, but maintained that I had overreacted by involving the police. She concluded by saying she would forgive me if I dropped the charges against our parents. I didn't respond. Her message showed that she still didn't understand the gravity of what had happened or her role in it. She was still viewing herself as the victim rather than recognizing how her actions had violated my boundaries and trust. My parents predictably didn't apologize at all. My father sent a single text. When you're ready to apologize for disrespecting your family, we'll be waiting. My mother left tearful voicemails about how I had broken her heart and destroyed the family. Neither acknowledged that copying my key without permission was wrong. Neither recognized that moving Madison in without my consent was a violation. They were still operating under the belief that their status as parents gave them the right to override my autonomy. The criminal charges for the key duplication were relatively minor in the legal sense. My parents received probation and a fine, but the symbolic impact was significant. For perhaps the first time in their lives, they faced tangible consequences for violating boundaries. Whether that would lead to any genuine reflection or change remained to be seen, but at least a precedent had been set. I would no longer tolerate their controlling behavior, even if it meant involving authorities. As difficult as the aftermath was, I didn't regret my decision. My apartment was mine again. My privacy was restored. My boundaries had been forcefully reasserted. The emotional cost was high, but the alternative, continuing to allow my family to violate my space and ignore my autonomy, would have been even higher in the long run. One night, about a week after the incident, as I was finally starting to feel comfortable in my apartment again, my neighbor Tim knocked on my door. "Hey," he said awkwardly when I opened it. "I saw what happened last week with the police and everything. I just wanted to check if you're okay." His concern was unexpected but welcome. We hadn't been more than nodding acquaintances before exchanging brief greetings in the hallway or elevator. "I'm getting there," I told him honestly. "It was a difficult situation with my family." Tim nodded. "I heard some of it through the wall. Sounded intense. Listen, a few of us in the building are having a small get-together on Saturday. Nothing fancy, just pizza and games. If you want to join us, you'd be welcome." The invitation touched me more than I expected. In the aftermath of potentially losing my family connections, the offer of new social connections felt particularly meaningful. "I'd like that," I said. "Thank you." As Tim walked away, I realized that while the incident had potentially cost me some family relationships, it had also opened the door to new connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation or control. And perhaps that was a silver lining to this otherwise painful chapter of my life. 3 months have passed since that fateful day when I came home to find Madison in my apartment. 3 months since I made the call that had my family removed from my home in handcuffs. 3 months of rebuilding my life on my terms, without the constant pressure of their expectations and demands. The first few weeks were the hardest. Despite knowing I had made the right decision, I struggled with guilt and doubt. Years of conditioning had taught me that standing up to my family was wrong, that choosing my own well-being over their demands was selfish. Breaking free of that programming wasn't easy. There were nights when I lay awake wondering if I had overreacted, if I should have found a way to compromise, if I had permanently damaged relationships that could have been salvaged. But gradually, with time and distance, my perspective clarified. What my parents and Madison had done wasn't just inconsiderate, it was a profound violation of my boundaries and my home. Their actions showed a fundamental lack of respect for me as an independent adult. No amount of family obligation justified what they had done. Surprisingly, I wasn't entirely alone during this period. Aunt Carol remained a consistent source of support, checking in regularly, and offering a balanced perspective on the family dynamics. She had always been somewhat removed from the more toxic aspects of our family system, perhaps because she had established her own firm boundaries with my mother years ago. "Your mother and I had a similar falling out when we were in our 20s, she confided during one of our calls. "She thought she had the right to borrow my car whenever she wanted because we were sisters. When I finally put my foot down and reported it as stolen after she took it without asking for the 5th time, she didn't speak to me for 2 years. "How did you reconcile?" I asked, curious about whether there was a path forward with my own family. "She had a child," Aunt Carol said simply. "You. Having you made her reach out because she wanted her sister in her child's life. We established new boundaries then. They weren't perfect, but they were better than nothing." The story gave me hope that perhaps someday my relationships with my family could be rebuilt on healthier foundations. But I also accepted that it might not happen, and that I needed to be okay with that possibility. Beyond family, I found support in unexpected places. The neighbors' gathering that Tim invited me to turned into a regular Saturday night tradition. Through those game nights, I formed genuine friendships with several people in my building. There was Tim and his girlfriend Alicia, the retired Professor Walter from the 5th floor, the nursing student Jasmine from across the hall, and the newlyweds Brandon and Kyle from 2 floors down. We were a diverse group in terms of age, background, and interests, but we enjoyed each other's company and respected each other's boundaries. It was refreshing to be part of a social circle where no was accepted without argument, and preferences were honored without question. At work, I opened up to a few close colleagues about what had happened. Their responses were overwhelmingly supportive. Several shared their own stories of family boundary violations and the steps they had taken to protect themselves. I realized that my experience, while painful, was far from unique. Many adults struggle with family members who refuse to acknowledge their autonomy and respect their boundaries. I also started seeing a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and boundary setting. Dr. Lewis helped me understand the patterns that had defined my family relationships for decades and provided tools for establishing healthier boundaries in the future. Most importantly, she helped me work through the guilt that had plagued me since the incident, reassuring me that protecting myself was not only acceptable but necessary. "The family system you grew up in was fundamentally unhealthy," she explained during one session. "Your parents never developed the ability to see you as a separate person with your own rights and needs. To them, you were always an extension of themselves, something they owned rather than someone they raised. Breaking free from that dynamic was always going to be painful, but it was necessary for your well-being." About 6 weeks after the incident, I received a letter from Madison. Unlike her text message, which had been defensive and accusatory, the letter seemed genuinely reflective. She acknowledged that moving into my apartment without permission had been wrong. She admitted that she had known our parents copied the key, without my consent, and had gone along with their plan despite knowing it violated my privacy. She took responsibility for her role in the situation and expressed regret for the damage it had caused to our relationship. "Living with Aunt Carol has been eye-opening," she wrote. "She treats me like an adult with responsibilities, not like a child who needs constant rescue. For the first time, I'm facing consequences for my actions and learning to stand on my own feet. I've found a job at a local marketing firm. It's entry-level, and the pay isn't great, but it's a start. I'm saving for my own apartment. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I'm beginning to understand why what we did was so wrong. You deserve better from all of us." The letter moved me deeply. It was the first time Madison had ever taken responsibility for her actions without deflecting blame or playing the victim. It suggested a level of growth and self-awareness that gave me hope for her future, and possibly for our relationship as siblings. I wrote back thanking her for the apology and expressing my support for her new path. We weren't ready for a face-to-face meeting yet, but it was a start. My parents, in contrast, remained entrenched in their position. The criminal charges and restraining order had humiliated them in front of friends and extended family, damaging their carefully cultivated image as perfect parents. Rather than reflecting on the behaviors that had led to those consequences, they doubled down on their narrative that I was an ungrateful son who had betrayed his family over something trivial. Through the family grapevine, I heard that they were telling anyone who would listen that I had gone crazy and called the police on them for no reason. They conveniently omitted the parts about copying my key without permission and moving Madison into my apartment without asking. In their version of events, they were innocent victims of my irrational anger. Some relatives believed them without question. Others were skeptical and reached out to hear my side of the story. A few, like Aunt Carol, knew from experience that my parents' account was likely missing crucial details. The family essentially divided into camps: those who supported my parents unconditionally, those who supported me, and those who tried to remain neutral. The division was painful, but it also revealed who in my extended family truly valued mutual respect and healthy boundaries versus who prioritized maintaining the status quo regardless of how toxic it had become. It was a difficult but necessary sorting process. By the 3-month mark, I had established a new normal. My apartment was fully mine again, with no traces of Madison's brief residence. I had changed the locks, upgraded my security system, and even rearranged some furniture to reclaim the space psychologically as well as physically. The restraining order against my parents and Madison remained in effect, though I was considering allowing it to lapse for Madison, given her apparent growth and genuine apology. More importantly, I had begun to heal emotionally. The guilt that had initially overwhelmed me had subsided. The doubts about whether I had done the right thing had quieted. The fear of being completely alone without family connections had been replaced by appreciation for the new relationships I was building and the existing ones that had proven supportive and respectful. Dr. Lewis encouraged me to reflect on what I had learned from the experience and how those lessons could guide me moving forward. After some thought, I identified several key insights. First, true family is defined by mutual respect and healthy boundaries, not just shared DNA. The people who had supported me through this difficult time, Aunt Carol, my new friends, sympathetic colleagues, had shown more genuine care for my well-being than my parents had in years. Second, enabling toxic behavior never improves it. It only ensures it will continue. By finally establishing firm consequences for my family's boundary violations, I had created the only possible condition under which they might eventually change, facing the reality that their actions had real repercussions. Third, the temporary pain of standing up for myself was far less damaging than the long-term harm of continued submission to toxic control. Though the confrontation and its aftermath had been incredibly difficult, I now felt a freedom and peace that had been missing from my life for years. Fourth, forgiveness doesn't require allowing people to hurt you again. I was working on forgiving my family for my own peace of mind, but that forgiveness didn't mean giving them access to violate my boundaries in the future. True reconciliation, if it ever happened, would require acknowledgement of wrongdoing, genuine apology, and demonstrated change. Finally, I learned that I was stronger than I had ever believed. Despite years of conditioning to put my family's demands above my own needs, I had found the courage to say no when it mattered most. That strength would serve me well in all future relationships. As I sit in my apartment this evening, enjoying the quiet autonomy that I fought so hard to protect, I feel a sense of peace that once seemed impossible. The journey has been painful but necessary. The costs have been high but worth paying. The future remains uncertain in terms of my family relationships, but I face it with a confidence I never had before. Family relationships should be based on love, respect, and mutual support. When they become vehicles for control, manipulation, and boundary violations, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself, and ultimately for them, is to say no, to stand firm, to demand the respect that every human being deserves. I don't know if my parents will ever understand why their actions were so profoundly wrong. I don't know if Madison's growth will continue, or if she'll revert to old patterns under their influence. I don't know if we'll ever rebuild relationships that are truly healthy and mutually respectful. But I do know this: whatever happens, I will never again allow anyone, family or not, to violate my boundaries without consequences. That commitment to self-respect may have cost me some relationships, but it has given me something far more valuable: the freedom to live on my own terms. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect your boundaries with family or friends? How did you handle it, and what did you learn from the experience? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe to the channel for more stories about setting boundaries and building healthy relationships, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to stand up for themselves. Thank you for listening. And remember, true love, including family love, always includes respect.